There is no formula that is so basic. If anything, all formulas should be considered fundamental. We explore the power of the law, rows, columns, round down, and the mod formulas in Excel, and we go deeper into how they are applied. You want to enjoy? Follow us, subscribe, and like. Let's get into it and explore the power of simple formulas in Excel. Looking at the row formula basically facilitates the counting of rows specific to a row that is active. For example, if we put an equal sign in row C3 and we insert the function row, we can just open and close the bracket. Opening and closing the bracket meaning that it is referring to the row in which the formula is computing from. So if we press enter, it is row 3. If we scroll down, we can see that for 3, it is in row 3 and 8 is in row 8. And even if we came and started in any other cell and we input row and we close, it will still give us row 3, irrespective of which column we press the row function in row 3. Now, if we came and say, for example, computed, we input an equal sign in M3, but reference row B12. So Excel will tell us that B12 is actually row 12, and we return it in the cell where you input the row function, meaning that when you reference any cell, Excel will return for you the row which function is computing. But if you reference a different cell from where the row is computing, Excel will return the row that is being referenced. Now, closely related to the row formula, we have a rows formula. Now, note this. If we input row, first of all, Excel tells us that the row returns the row number of a reference. But when we open the formula, it is asking us for a reference. Assuming we use rows instead, and it is asking us for an array. So, for example, if we input like this, from G3 to G10 and we close bracket, Excel will return for us 8 rows. So G3, G4, G5, G6, G7, G8, G9, G10. Let's color them and count them afresh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are 8 rows. So basically, the rows formula, if we compute again, Excel tells us that it returns the number of rows in a reference or array. So if we say row G3 to G10, yeah, rows G3 to G10 and we cross bracket, it gives us 8 rows. Now, note this. If we said rows and then we reference E3, E3 is where our formula is computing from. If we input E3 and we put a colon and then say E3, we press enter, it tells us it is 1 row. If we scroll down, it still tells us it is 1 row. Scroll down, each of them will be 1 row. Why? Because the first cell is computing from row E1, rows E1, E3 to E3. Then when you scroll down, it goes from E4 to E4. But now we can tell Excel to fix the starting point at E3, but the ending point keeps varying depending on how you scroll down the formula. So if you scroll down the formula to E4, it will be E3 to E4. To E5, it will be E3 to E5, E3 to E6, E3 to E7, like that. So let's come here and we press F4 once and we click enter. So if we now come and scroll down the same formula but while holding E3 fixed and we scroll down, it will be counting for us rows, 1 rows, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows. So this is 1. When you scroll down, starting from E3, it becomes row 2, 3 rows, 4 rows, 5 rows. So the major difference between the row and the rows formula is that the row returns the row number of reference, whereas the rows function expects an array or formula and it will return the number of rows that are referenced. Let's try and, for example, say is equal to rows, then we say H3 to I4. Now we have highlighted 2 rows and 2 columns. Let's even put to I5 so that they become 3 rows. So whereas we have highlighted 3 rows, but we are also covering 3 columns, and Excel is intelligent enough to ignore the columns and tells us that the area of reference refers to rows. That is row 3, row 4, and row 5. only that they span not only one column but two columns. That is mainly about the row and the rows function. Similarly, let's first hide this and look at the column and the columns function. Now, when you are referring to rows, rows move vertically, whereas columns move horizontally. So if we come and click in column Q and we put equal sign column function, and then we open the bracket and close the bracket, it will tell us that Q is actually column 17. Now, if we come instead of opening and closing brackets, but we refer to P, it tells us that P is column 16. Just like column, if we use the columns function instead, if we input equal signs and we input columns, it tells us that it returns the number of columns in an array or reference. So if we come and highlight column Q to column S and we close, it tells us no, we have to use columns. So we go back to our formula and we put columns and enter. So it will tell us 3 columns. So we can see that in the row and columns function basically return one row and column of reference for the functions without S, but for columns and rows which have S at the end, then they count the number of rows and columns respectively that relate to the selected area. Let us now look at another function called the mod function. Now, if we put equal signs mod, it returns the remainder after a number is divided by a divisor. From our elementary school arithmetic, the mod represents the modulus, and the modulus is basically a reminder. So let's say mod 5, then 2. 5 is the number, 2 is the divisor. So what basically this formula requests us is that what would be the remainder if you divide 5 by 2? We know that when you divide 5 by 2, 5 is not directly divisible by 2. And what is immediately before 5 that is divisible by 2 is 4. And when you get 4 divided by 2, you get a 2. Now, if you get 5 divided by 2, the closest multiple of 2 that is before 5 is a 4. So 5 minus 1 is a 1. So it means that when you divide by 2, the remainder is 1. So the answer is 1. If you get 7 instead, if you get 5 and divide by 3. Now, if you divide 5 by 3, we know that the multiple of 3 that is close to 5 is 6, and 5 is less than 6. So the only multiple of 3 that is below 5 is the 3. So 5 minus 3, the remainder is 2. Now, if you get 15 and divide by 9. Now, the mod is 6. So the mod of 5 as a number and 9 as a divisor is 6. How is that arrived at? It basically refers to the multiple of 9 that is before 15 is 9. Get 15 and subtract 9, the remainder is 6, and that is the mod. Now, basically, the mod gives us a remainder after a number is divisible by the divisor. Now, lastly, let us look at the round down function. So, round down, now, first of all, let's see what X is telling us. Round down. It rounds the number down towards 0. Now, if you highlight this, it asks us for the number and the number of digits by which it should be rounded. So for example, if we get 9.753 and then we round it to 0, the answer is a 9. So it is rounding it down from wherever it is to the closest digit. Now, if we get 872 and we round it down to 0 number of digits, the answer is 0. Now, it does not matter whether it's 0.8 or 0.99999. Rounding it down will always take you to 0. Now, if you rounded off 0.752 and you round it down instead to 1 digit, then it will give us 0.7. Let us now look at how to use the match function, and then we shall look at how to use the index function. Now, we have a matrix that has the quantity of commodities exported for the different years and for the different months of the year. Now, we want to identify in this array what position does number 8 take, and in this array what position does 2015 take, and we identify that using a match function. This is how the match function works. For 2015, we insert March and tells us that March returns the relative position of an item in an array that matches a specified value in a specified order. So the specified order is what we have as this array, and then the specified value is what we shall have as 2015. So let's insert the March, and then the value that we want to look up is 2015, and the array that we would want to look up from is A8 to A18, and then a comma, and then we want to do an exact match. When we cross the bracket, it tells us that it's number 5. So can we establish the array is A8 to A18? So A8 starts from here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is actually 5. Let's go and match 8 in the array B7 to M7. So let's highlight our cells that have formulas. So if we come and put a match in here, and then the lookup value is 8, followed by the lookup array, which is B7 to M7, and then the type of match is an exact match, which is 0, and we cross brackets. So this tells us that 8 is instead number 8 in our array from B7. Now if we were to change our array instead from A7, instead of B7 we change it from A7, 8 is giving us position number 9. Now assuming we want to look up the value for August 2015, so the value that we want to look up is 192. Now we use the index function to look up that value. Now here we have seen that from B7, August is month 8, month 8 is position 8, and then 2015 is position 5. So when we come and do, now for me to avoid these coincidences, I'm going to start my matching for the year from A7, and then I also start my matching for the month from A7. Now, so if I'm to do an index, so an index, it returns the value or reference of the cell at the intersection of a pair of row and column in a given range. So if we come and we highlight this data from A7 up to M18, then you want to look for the intersection of this column and this row, this column and this row, and then we find this number. So that is the export value relating to the month 8 of the year 2015. So we come and say that we use the index. The array is A7 to M18, and then the row index. Now we are saying that if we are going through this index, this array, we want to identify the row. So the row is either the first or the second, the third, up to the last, and the column is either the first, the second, the third, up to the last. So now we have already identified our rows and columns using the match functions, and therefore the row is relating to the year, which is 6, and then the column relates to the month, and we have already identified it as 9. We click in it, and then we close and we press enter, and it is returning for us our value as 192. Now let us now go and look for another value, for example relating to June of 2019. For us to be able to get that, now we shall use our match function. Now let us try to instead come and do the index, the match functions inside the index function. So in this case we have 2019, and then the month is June. So if we are to do the match function, we come and do match. Now we do index, and index we can just come and highlight our values only. Index does not restrict you where to start from, as long as you have captured the values, the cells where you think that the value you are looking for resides. So in this case, I'm going to highlight B. I've highlighted B8 to M18, and then I come and identify the row number. Now the row number is identified by the position of the year. So I come and use my match function, and the lookup value is the year, which is 2019. The lookup array is from position 8 to 18. And then I put a 0 for exact match. I put a comma. I now need to identify the column number. So the column number is identified using a match function again. Now the match function lookup value is the month that I'm interested in, and in which array do the month reside. It is from B7 to M7, and then I put a 0 for an exact match, and I close the match. Then I close the index and I press enter. So my value is 2006. That is how you can actually use the match and index functions to return values in given arrays. Let us now come and look at how these functions can be applied and combined together. We can combine the formulas that we have looked at. We have key functions for row, columns, and then rows, columns, the modulus, and round down to see how we can solve some problems relating to data analysis and reporting. Now let's now use our commodity data for the different years and different months, and also the prices data for the different years and different months, and the exchange rates applicable, because these prices are in USD. If you'd want to compute the revenue in local currency, then you'd have to multiply the product of the price and the quantity by the exchange rate. Now we have our exchange rate in column format, whereas the price and quantity are in a tabular format. So suppose we would want to align the quantities and prices to the exchange rates. Now, one, we must first of all identify the months and years that relate to which our exchange rates relate. So we have exchange rates in this array. What we do, let's insert two columns, and then let's also insert a row. And why are we inserting them? Here we want to put a year, and here we would want to put a month. Now we would want to put the years in such a way that if we put 12 months, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if I come and highlight this month, now would want to put a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we would want to come to the years, and then we say that all these years should relate to 2011. And then we come and do the same. We put the year, the month for the second year, and then for the year, this year we call it 2012. Now, when you want to be efficient with Excel, how would you do it in such a way that you avoid replicating these numbers? You want to do sequences, but in a dynamic way, that you actually put one formula that will reproduce these numbers for you, and you end the chapter. Now let's start with month. We want to repeat the month 12 times. And how do we achieve repeating the month 12 times? And we use the formula in such a way that when we scroll that formula up to the end of our data, then we should be able to have our month. So let us know how we can use the function that we have looked at to achieve what we are interested in. Now, for month, we want to replicate the month 1 up to 12 for every 12 months of each of the years. So we identify the month by using the columns function. Columns function, we insert the columns function and we highlight from B5 to B5, and then we have the first column as 1 up to the 12th, but we want it to repeat itself when we go to the subsequent year. And how do we achieve that? We have to use the mod functions in such a way that the first row is 1 and the last row is 12. So suppose we get this 1 and then we insert a mod function. Now the modulus of a 1 with 12 as a divisor, then you get a 1, and then up to the 12th month you are getting a 0 instead of a 12. Our sequence now starts from 1 up to 11, and for us would want to do it from 1 up to 12. So how do we achieve that? One is that instead of taking the modulus of 1 with respect to 12 as a divisor, we take the modulus of a 0. So how do we achieve a 0? We subtract a 1 from our columns function. Now we have a 0 up to 11. Now for us to be able to achieve 1 up to 12, we just come and add a 1 to our function, and then when we scroll from 1 up to last month, then we have returned our 12 months. Now if we get this and scroll it all across up to the last value, then we have the sequence of 12 months repeating itself. So we have been able to use the modulus for us to repeat a sequence of 12 numbers for the number of times we want. Now let's go and see how we can use the formulas, the functions we have looked at, to return the year. Now we shall do more or less the same, but instead of using the mod function, we shall use the round function. And here we shall say that columns B4 to B4. Remember that the last row reference of B4 is not fixed at B. So when we scroll, we have our numbers increasing. But now we want to do it in such a way that for the first 12 columns, we will replicate the same number 2011. So one is that we have to do it in such a way that we round down. We have to get these numbers from 1 up to 12 and divide them by 12. So if we divide them by 12, we have a number 0.8 up to 1. So, but we want it to be less than the last column in the sequence to be less than 1. And so how do we achieve it? We just get this whole thing and subtract a 1. So we close this into a bracket. We get the columns and then we subtract a 1. So we close the brackets minus 1. We close the columns minus 1 into bracket and divide by 12. So we get a 0 up to 0.9 for 12 digits. All the 12 digits are lying below column. Now, for us to be able to convert all this into one number, then we round down. So we come and insert a round down function outside our columns function, and we put a bracket to open the round down because the existing bracket was for the columns function, and we round down to 0 and we click enter. And we come and scroll, then we see that it is repeating 0 12 times, then 1 12 times. So if we want to do our years from 2011, then we say 2011 plus the function that we got. And then if we scroll everything up to the end, then we shall have our years up to 2021 December. Now we have able used the round down function, the columns function, and then the mod and columns function to return our sequence of years and months. and of course this is the exchange rate. And then we can come and input the quantities, and then also come here and include the prices, and then we shall have our revenue, which is the quantity times the price times the EX rate. Now let's first go and see how we use the rows function to return exactly what we have returned, and then we shall come back here and then look up our quantities and prices and then be able to do the multiplication. So what if now our exchange rates, instead of being organized in columns, we have them organized in rows, all rows falling within one column. Now we come and insert the years and months. So let us come and put the year and then the month. Now remember that for us to repeat 12 numbers while counting the rows endlessly, we have to make use of the modulus function where the divisor is 12, because we want to repeat the sequence 12 times. So instead of using the columns function, we use the rows function, and then the rows is from the first row to the first row, but from is fixed, to is not fixed. Now in the columns we were fixing the column identifier, but here what we are unfixing is the row identifier. Instead of the column identifier, we unfix the row identifier. So if we scroll down, then we shall have our number of rows being identified. Now when we get this and then we take the modulus of this number with respect to 12 as a divisor, then we shall have our numbers repeated from 1 to 11. Now we would want to have these numbers running 12 times, so we shall just get our rows and subtract 1 such that the first row is a 0 and not a 1. So if we scroll down, we have 0 up to 11, but there are 12 rows. Now we have another 0 up to 11, and there are also 12. However, we want our months not to run from 0 to 11, but from 1 to 12. So what do? We just come here and add a 1. So if we add a 1, we shall have our sequence running from 1 up to 12, then runs again, 1 up to 12, then runs again. So we are able to scroll our formula from the first cell to the last cell, and we have able to run our sequences. Now for the year, instead of using the modulus function, we use the round down function. So let's first do the rows. The rows we are using is from A5 to A4 to A4. But remember, on the 4 you unlock so that you allow the range to expand as you move down the rows. Now if you click enter, we have increasing number of rows. The first set of 12 rows representing 12 months to be 0. And how do you achieve that? 1, we come and put the round down function, and then with 0 number of digits, and then we close. So there we have round down. Now what we are rounding down is supposed to be divided by 12. So if we do that, then we have the first set of 11 numbers with zeros, the second set of 12 numbers with ones. Now what do we need to do? The trick here we have to deploy is in such a way that this station in the first row, instead of returning a 1, so if we highlight the rows and we press F9, it gives a 1. Ctrl Z to undo. We want it to return a 0 instead. And how do we do that? We get all this, we put it inside the bracket, and then we subtract a 1 before we divide by a 12. So we shall now have a 0 running up to the 12 rows. And then once we do that, we scroll down and we shall have a 1 also running for 12 rows. And then let's see how a 2 runs. The 2 runs also for 12 rows, and it means that we are ready to scroll our formula up to the end. The reason why we have to get this formula right is that when you are to do this work manually, you are bound to make mistakes. Now, if we come and want to insert the quantities and the prices, so this is the exchange rate, and then we can come and copy this quantity and prices and revenue here, and then we paste them here as transposed values, paste special, transpose values, and then we are now ready to do our lookups using the index and match. So we are saying that for the quantity, go use the index to look through the quantities table. Now remember to fix by pressing F4. Now the match, you identify the rows, whereby the rows are years, by using the match function. Now the match function, the lookup value is when you come here, the lookup value for the year is 2011. Now because you want to scroll the formula to the right, you want to fix the row. So before the row is 4, and then you let the column to be dynamic. Then the lookup array is none other than, remember that if your column your index starts from B8, your lookup array should also start from row 8. So lookup array is B8 to B18. We lock by pressing F4, and then we put a 0 as an exact match identifier. We put a comma, so the row column we use a match again, and now we come and go to again our array. The lookup value still in the commodities table is the month one. In this case, for this cell, we want that when we move to the right, we stay in row 1, so we need to lock the row reference, which is the 5, and then the lookup array again. If we are starting our search from B8, then when we go to the match, we should also start from B and not A. So we lock, and then we put a comma, exact match, we put a 0, we cross the match, and we cross the index, and we enter. Now if we come and scroll to the right, then we shall have our values for all the years. Now we do exactly the same for prices, but we use the prices table. So we use index, we go and identify the range of our prices, F4, and lock everything, columns and rows. The row is the year, so we use the match function. What are we looking for? We are looking for the year 2011, and we want to lock it at the row level. And then the lookup array again under the commodity prices is this range from A8, lock 0 for exact match, and then the column array is the loop. We again use the match. Lookup value, we come to where we want to return the number, and the value is the month 1. We lock at the row identifier, which is at 5, and then the lookup array, and then again under the commodity prices, the months are in this array, and then exact match, we put a 0, and then we cross the match, cross the index, and enter. So the prices are 144 for the first cell. Now the revenue is equal to the exchange rate times the quantity times the price, and this will be our revenue. So we scroll up to the end, and then these will be our revenues. If we want to make our data visible, we just come and identify this cross cursor sign, and then we right click, and then we shall have all the values being unhidden and being visible. So that is how we can use the rows, columns, index, match functions, and modulus and round down function for us to be able to convert data from a table to mainly a row, and so that we can be able to multiply likes for like when all of them are underlined under the respective columns in the respective rows. So I hope that with practice, the learner and the followers will be able to use these functions. We can recast our functions that we have been able to look at. We have rows, columns, then we have index, we have match, we have index, then match, then we have modulus, we have round down, and we have row and column without an S at the end. Now, and it is these that we have mainly focused on and see how they can be applied for data analysis.